Elias Ward pulled hard on the reins when he saw something lying in the red dust ahead. At first, he thought it was a dead animal. Then the shape moved. His stomach tightened. It was a woman, a tall Apache woman stretched out under the burning sun, her body barely moving. He jumped from his horse and knelt beside her. Her skin was coated with dust and dried blood. Deep purple marks crossed her shoulders and back, clear signs of a whip. A strip of leather still bound her wrists. Her breathing was weak and uneven, like it could stop at any moment. The heat rose from the ground in cruel waves, but the cold fear inside Elias was worse. This could be a trap, the Apache had warned him many times to stay out of their affairs. He knew that. But when he touched her neck, he felt a pulse so faint it scared him. If he rode away, the sun would finish what the whip had started. She would be dead before nightfall. Elias clenched his jaw. He pulled the knife from his belt and cut through the leather. The enemy lifted her. She was heavy, strong, even in near death, but he forced himself not to stop. He laid her across the horse and swung into the saddle. Dust flew behind them as he rode hard for home. He did not look back. If someone saw him, they would know where he stood now. He burst through the old wooden gate and carried her into the cabin. He laid her on a worn blanket near the fireplace and hurried to light a fire. The flames flickered across his tired face as he fetched the last water he had. Water was precious in the dry season, but he used it anyway, cleaning the blood and dust from her skin. She was still alive. Barely Elias had not planned to save anyone. Years ago, sickness had taken his wife and his 2 small boys. Since then, he lived alone like a shadow, caring only for dry land and thin cattle. He stayed far from town and farther from trouble. But tonight, that life cracked open. The woman was unlike any he had seen. Her body was powerful, built like a warrior. The marks on her back spoke of harsh punishment. Elias knew the truth without being told. If her people found out she was here, they would come. Night fell fast. Wind pushed sand through the cracks in the cabin walls. Elias sat beside her and gave her a small bowl of water. Her lips moved, and she drank slowly before slipping back into darkness. He pulled his rifle close and kept his eyes on the door. He knew men who left a woman to die did not stop halfway. Hours later, a sudden movement woke him. The woman sat up, panic blazing in her eyes. In one quick motion, she grabbed a knife from near the stove. The blade caught the firight. Elias did not move. He raised his hands slowly. "If you are going to stab me, do it clean," he said. "But if you want to live, put the knife down." She breathed hard, eyes searching the cabin. It was small and old, but not a cage. Her gaze returned to Elias. He stood calm and still. "I cut your bonds," he said. "If you want to leave, the door is open. But outside, there is only hot sand and death." Her hand shook. After a long moment, the knife fell to the floor. Her body slumped as if all strength had left her. Elias picked up the blade and gave her the water. "Drink," he said. She watched him as she drank, unsure, guarded. Elias stepped outside and sat on the porch with his rifle across his lap. He stayed there, not leaving and not coming back in. All night she watched him through the door. Each time fear pulled her from sleep, he was still there. When dawn came, Elias spoke without turning around. "You can stay until you are strong," he said, "or you can leave. I will not stop you." She did not answer. She only tightened her grip on the blanket around her shoulders. That was answer enough. When the sun rose, she could stand. Elias worked on the fence, not looking at her. He told her where to find water if she wanted food. She said nothing, but she worked. Her strength surprised him. Someone so close to death should not have been able to move like that all day. She watched him. When he rested, she finished the work. That night, she cooked without being asked. He nodded in thanks. Nothing more was needed. Days passed. The cabin filled with the sounds of tools and effort. Slowly, the silence of Elias's life faded. One evening, she finally spoke. "Why did you save me?" Elias stared at the dry land. "I could not watch someone die again." She nodded, something heavy loosening inside her. That peace did not last long. One afternoon, Elias heard hooves in the distance. Dust rose on the horizon. He reached for his rifle. They were coming. The riders came fast, 3 of them cutting through the heat like dark shadows. Their horses slowed near the gate, hooves grinding into the dry earth. Their faces were painted for war, eyes sharp and hard. Elias stepped forward with his rifle, raised, placing himself between the cabin and the yard. Behind him, the Apache woman froze, her hand drifting toward the small knife at her side. The leader spoke first. His voice was flat and cold. He said the woman belonged to them and must be returned. His words carried no mercy, only command. Elias did not move. He said she was hurt and would stay until she healed. The wind pushed dust between them. Another rider leaned forward, anger flashing in his eyes. He said she had been cast out and had no right to live. If Elias sheltered her, he would become their enemy. Elias's grip tightened on the rifle. He told them they would have to go through him first. For a long moment, no one moved. Horses snorted and stamped the ground. The woman behind Elias stared at his back, her chest tight, her mind racing. No one had ever stood between her and death. Before, at last, the leader raised his hand. He said they would return. Next time, they would not come alone. The riders turned and disappeared into the dust, leaving the yard silent and heavy. The woman's knees weakened. Elias turned to her and spoke quietly. They would come back with more men. If she stayed, they would have to prepare. She nodded. Once, fear still lived in her eyes, but something else burned there now. Resolve. That night, they worked without rest. Elias dragged old sandbags from the shed and stacked them under the windows. He counted bullets by lantern light. She rolled up her sleeves and helped block the door, her movements steady and sure. For the first time since he found her, she was no longer hiding. She had chosen a side. 3 days passed. Each morning, Elias scanned the horizon. Each night, they slept in turns. On the 3rd evening, red dust rose again. This time, it was not 3 riders. It was many. Nearly 20 warriors circled the ranch, closing in like a tightening rope. The air filled with the smell of leather and sweat. An older man rode forward, silver hair falling over his shoulders, his face lined and stern. He asked why Elias kept a woman who had been cast out. Elias answered simply, she was alive. She had the right to choose. A young warrior shouted that she had dishonored the tribe. Before Elias could speak, the woman stepped forward. Her voice was strong and clear. She said she had been punished for not bearing children. That was no crime. A ripple of voices moved through the group. The elder studied her for a long time. He said that if she stayed, she would sever all ties to the tribe. She would no longer be hunted, but she would no longer belong. She nodded. She chose life here. The elder warned Elias that her fate was now tied to his. Elias said he understood. After a long pause, the warriors withdrew. But the elder promised to return at dawn with the council. The final decision would be made then. When they were gone, the woman stood shaking, her strength nearly spent. Elias told her everything would change by morning. He asked if she was sure. She met his eyes and said she had already died once. She would not die again before sunrise. Elias stood ready with his rifle. She tightened the bandage on her shoulder and stepped beside him. A low horn sounded. This time, dozens came. Elders, warriors, and 2 older women with power in their eyes. The woman stood tall, shoulder to shoulder with Elias. The elder women asked her to choose: return and face judgment, or walk the path of exile forever. The wind swept her hair back. She chose life. Life on her own terms. The elders spoke among themselves. At last, they declared her name struck from the tribe. She would not be hunted, but she would never return. The elder turned to Elias and said the consequences were now his as well. Elias accepted them without flinching. One by one, the riders left. The sound of hooves faded into the open land. Only then did the woman breathe out. She had survived. Dark clouds rolled in that afternoon. Rain fell for the first time in weeks. Elias stood in it, watching the land soften. She stepped into the yard, lifting her face to the sky. Rain washed the dust and blood from her skin. The past was leaving her with every drop. Elias told her she was free to go now. The road still led south. She asked if he wanted her to leave. He shook his head. He said the ranch was no longer meant for one person. She smiled for the first time. They worked side by side as the rain eased. The land looked different, stronger. That night, they sat by a fire under a clean sky. Elias spoke of building anew. Pen tomorrow. She nodded, but neither of them slept easily because both knew the land remembered blood. And peace in the West never lasted forever. They were coming. The night after the elders left was quiet, but it was not peaceful. The land felt watchful, as if it was holding its breath. Elias stayed awake long after the fire burned low, listening to the wind move through the grass. The woman slept inside the cabin, her breathing slow and steady. For the first time since he had found her in the desert, her dreams did not pull her back into fear. Morning came soft and gray. The storm had passed, leaving the earth dark and damp. Elias stepped outside and looked across the ranch. The fences stood firm, the cabin held strong. Nothing had been taken. Nothing had been burned. It was over. She joined him on the porch, her hair tied back, her posture calm but alert. She asked what would happen now. Elias said life would go on. Cattle would need water. Fences would break again. The land would keep asking for work. She nodded. That was something she understood. They spent the day rebuilding what the rain had. Weakened, she lifted logs that would have taken 2 men. Elias drove posts into softened ground. Their movements fit together without thought, like they had been working side by side for years. No orders were given. No words were wasted. When the sun dipped low, Elias finally spoke. He said she should have a name here if she planned to stay. She looked at him for a long moment, then said her name slowly, clearly, as if claiming it again. Takina. Elias repeated it once, testing the sound. Then he nodded. That was enough. Days turned into weeks. The ranch changed. The wind no longer howled through broken boards. The cattle grew calmer. At night, the cabin filled with the smell of food and fire instead of silence. Elias found himself speaking more, remembering things he had buried with his family. Takina listened without judgment. She understood loss. She carried it in her scars. One evening, Elias asked her why she had said she could not live without a man. Takina stared into the fire before answering. She said she had not meant weakness. She meant survival. In her world, standing alone meant death here. Standing together meant life. Elias nodded. He understood that too. Trouble did not return. The tribe kept their word. No riders came. No threats followed. The land accepted their choice. One morning, Elias handed Takina a set of tools. and told her the south field was hers to shape as she wished. She smiled, a small smile, but proud. She planted stakes and marked ground, already seeing what it could become. That afternoon they worked until their hands ached. When the sun sank low, Elias stopped and looked at the ranch. It no longer felt like a place of ghosts. It felt alive. That night, rain fell again, gentle this time. They stood together on the porch, watching the water soak into the soil. Elias said some people are born into a home. Others have to build one. Takina said some homes are made from land. Others are made from choice. They stood in silence after. That dot in the quiet of the prairie, two lives that had been broken found balance. Not through saving or owning, but through standing side by side when walking away would have been easier. The West did not soften for them. It never would. But it no longer stood against them either. And sometimes that is all a person needs.